Did you know that death is an important part of life? Let's talk about it in today's Unconventional Conversation with Pastor Paul.
This is Unconventional Conversations with Pastor Paul.
Glad you're here for this conversation. Please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, help this algorithm go, share this with others. And if you're able, go to my website at pastor-paul.com and subscribe with a little monthly financial help to keep this work alive. Of sharing a first century biblical text for a 21st century spirituality. About a year ago, I took a spiritual journey with mushrooms. During that spiritual journey with guides and a cohort of people going through it with me, I was told that I was related to the beetle. No, not the band, but the bug. And I thought to myself, great, I hear of people going on this spiritual trip of psychedelics and they see themselves as a cheetah or a jaguar or something cool. And of course, I'm the beetle. But as I studied in follow-up to that spiritual journey and tried to look at the significance of what I learned, I found out that the beetle is a very, very important animal. Not only are there more variety of beetles than any other creature on earth, but they're very important in taking dead things and breaking them down to create nutrients that bring new life to the earth. And so I'm all in on that. I believe that it's important that things that are no longer serving us well need to be broken down through a process of death so that they bring new seasons of life for us. In fact, after that time, I got this necklace to remind myself. It's a tree of life and death that shows how important it is that we go through times of death in our life when relationships end or seasons end, jobs end, our children move out of the house and go to college or move to the next phase of life. And these are all ends that simulate death to us. Something is ending and we grieve it as if something is dying in our life. And so it's important to know that those times do hurt. I'm not saying we go, yay, I'm experiencing death, but we let ourselves grieve as if death has come to our life, and we let ourselves understand that through this grief process, I'm going to find life on the other side because my relative, the beetle, is going to come help and break that down into nutrients of new life. In Jonah chapter 2, we see this in the writing of the Hebrew Torah. You remember Jonah was the guy that got thrown into the ocean and swallowed by some big fish in the story and then taken and spit out in the place he was supposed to go in the first place. But in Jonah chapter 2, he's saying a prayer. And what we are seeing in Jonah chapter 2 in this mythology is Jonah having a time of simulated death when he's under the ocean and these ocean plants wrapping around my head as I'm sinking to the bottom of the ocean. And it says this very interesting thing. Those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace which could be theirs. And now I may be mixing up some translations there, but I love those versions of the passage. If you hold on to a season that's passing and won't let it go, you're going to miss out on the new that is to come. If you cling to something that has passed in its value in your life, you're going to miss what is coming ahead. And we see this happening in the characters of the Torah and the New Testament. Joseph is an example of this. He experienced death when his brothers threw him in a pit, when they sold him into slavery and his father thought he was dead. When he mourned and grieved them and they were painful, but they all led to moments when he fulfilled his purpose in life. We see Moses having to go to the other side of the desert and experiencing death, and Elijah who has to be fed by birds in the desert and is praying that he would just die, and David who has to run from King Saul who's trying to kill him. And even Jesus wandered in the desert for 40 days, trying to really see what his purpose was going forward. That's what happens in life. These moments of grieving. I'm not who I was before. I'm moving into this next season. And it's even when we lose friendships or relationships, we say, this is a painful moment. But it also tells me that I'm moving in to something else. It actually is what we're seeing in society today. Jesus predicted death. He was walking by the temple with his guys, and they're like, Jesus, this temple is so amazing. It represents a religious thing to us that is so important to who we are. And Jesus said, you know what? Like, not one stone of this thing is going to stand on another. And we're going to build something new. He was talking about a religious mindset and a status quo that had to come to an end. And I believe it's what we're seeing in this season, this right-wingism that we see not only in America breaking out in the American Christian Church, but we've seen it in elections in France and Germany. It is a spiritual thing. It's a thing where Jesus said leaven of bad theology would take away the eyes to see and ears to hear and hearts to understand. I believe that's what's happening to people who are under the influence of a status quo, of a generation that doesn't want to die. It wants to hold on to its power. Status quo is comfortable to the people that have power from it. And I once went through the Bible just at an urging in my spirit. How often does the Bible praise comfort? And the answer is, I really couldn't find a time the Hebrew Torah or the Christian New Testament said, it's good to be comfortable. Almost every time the Bible talks about comfort, it was a time when people were turning away from the purpose of seeking justice for the poor, the foreigner, the marginalized, and the economically disadvantaged. The only time the Bible talks about comfort that I could find in a positive light was being comforted in the presence of our enemies, or when walking through the valley of the shadow of death, being comforted in those times of seasons of death, not comforted in a time when we're fighting for status quo. I just want to encourage you. Jesus was saying, no, this is going to be a time of division, and we're going to rip this thing out by the roots and throw it in the fire so that something new can come. Isaiah 43 says, forget the former things. A new thing is happening. It's springing up in the desert. It's not growing in the normal places that you expect it to. It's springing up in the desert. Do you not perceive it? Can you not become aware of what's happening? Some of us are like, you're going to pry my status quo from my cold, dead hands. And I think that's why we see people defending the indefensible of a politicized religion, because we want that comfort of what we've known rather than going through the death of changing of seasons. Some of us have been through that death already, and we're saying, yes, give me what's on the other side of that. We've smelled the fresh air of a post-Christian world, and it's too beautiful for us stopping from going after it, even when it cost us death of relationship, of comfort, and of the things that we've known. But remember these stories about people that changed things by walking through the valley of the shadow of death and being comforted in those moments, as it talks about in the Torah in Psalm 23. And Jeremiah talked about it in Jeremiah 29:11, one of the most often quoted verses in evangelicalism when I was pastoring there. It says, I know the plans I have for you, declares God, or the universe, or whatever you see the divine as, and plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And that verse was written in a time of death and tearing down and things not happening well. And Jeremiah the prophet is saying to the people, yes, it is a rough time, but I'm telling you, hope is on the other side of this time of death. And that is the promise and hope I want to share with you today. There is a spirituality beyond what we've known in the evangelical American Christian world. There is a spirituality beyond the status quo that has comforted us for so long, that people are fighting to hold on to so they can continue in what they know. And it's a spirituality that's worth mourning the comfort of what we've known and walking through the valley of the shadow of death to see the hope and the future and the spirituality that is ahead. I'm Pastor Paul, and I'm here to bring a beautiful first century spiritual wisdom to serve a 21st century spirituality. And I hope that you love it and will subscribe to my channels, share my content, and if you're able to and would be so willing, would you help go to my website, pastor-paul.com, and share about $5 a month to help keep this work growing and helping and serving you if you feel like it does. Jesus had to have women helping to fund his ministry, and every village he would go to, people would feed him and put up his group of over 100 people traveling around, and then they would give money when he left. I need some help. I do work as a professor, work at a community college to make it pencil out, but I need your help to keep it going. Would you do so at pastor-paul.com? I'll see you next time for our next Unconventional Conversation with Pastor Paul.
This is Unconventional Conversations with Pastor Paul.